This week on Low Budget Binge, I check out films that range from poor to decent to pretty okay. At least it's better than the crop from the last few weeks. Welcome back to ML Miller Frights, a part of the Kings of Horror Network. I'm ML Miller. While you might be watching this video on the Kings of Horror Network, I urge you to click over to my ML Miller Frights YouTube page and give it a like. Please share with all of your buddies. Click subscribe to this channel, and don't forget to ring that bell for notifications. Low Budget Binge is where we venture down the paths less traveled and look at low budget, no budget, do-it-yourselves, and sometimes international films that never get that top billing you see in the usual Hollywood releases. I'll indicate in the review and down below where you can find these films, along with their trailers. Here we go. Crucified is new on demand and digital download from Uncorked Entertainment. It's directed by Claudio Lattanzi and written by Claudio Lattanzi and Antonio Tentori. The world has gone to shit due to an apocalyptic plague of unknown origins, and most people who haven't died have gone into hiding. A force of exterminators scour the buildings and streets for survivors, and when they find them, they crucify them and kill them. A small group of survivors take refuge in an abandoned building, but the threat of the exterminators looms ever closer. Crucified is a film that hinges on the final reveal, which I won't spoil here. Films like that have to rely on an interesting story that raises a bunch of questions worth sticking around for that reveal. The main problem with Crucified is that it's an extremely low-budget film. Most of the expansive shots of decimated buildings and streets are done in CG layered over abandoned warehouses and alleyways. But the bulk of the film is set inside an abandoned warehouse with characters who have holed themselves up to survive. Now, if the conversations were interesting and unique, that would be fine. But it's not. It's your typical Survivor-style arguments heard over and over again on every other episode of The Walking Dead. Should we stay? Should we go? Should we trust the new guy? I don't trust the new guy. How are we going to rebuild if we don't have trust? When is this going to end? It's just not enough meat on the sandwich to satisfy until the big reveal, and so it ends up feeling like a fluffy waste of time. The reveal is okay, and I think had this been a short film, it might have worked marvelously. While a lot of the actions of the previous hour of this hour and 10-minute movie kind of betray the reveal, I think it's a decent twist. I also want to commend director Claudio Lattanzi for being able to cobble together a movie about a world-spanning apocalyptic plague while simply filming inside of a room in an abandoned warehouse. That's some pull yourself up by your bootstraps indie filmmaking right there, and I respect that. Unfortunately, the final result doesn't live up to its ambition. Crucified incorporates CG with real-world urban decay well, and some of the scenes are decently shot. But I feel this was a scant story that proved to be too big for the aspirations of the director. The Dead of Night is new on-demand and digital download from Shout Studios. It's directed and written by Robert Dean. A rancher named Tommy, played by Jake Etheridge, helps his sister June, played by Colby Crane, pack up and leave a small country town in New Mexico, but they encounter a pair of wandering killers with animal masks stalking them for their sick pleasure. The Dead of Night is not your typical stalk and slash thriller. While I appreciate its back-to-basics slasher style that reminded me a bit of The Town That Dreaded Sundown meets The Strangers, it sort of just moseys around its narrative from one place to another and eventually happens upon some action and suspense when it's good and ready. The pacing is way off from the beginning and feels as if it were re-edited a bit somewhere along the line. There's a short first kill scene before the credits, and then a second extended scene that feels like another opening kill scene before we even meet the main characters of the story. There's an awful lot of fat to trim from this tale, and with it running about an hour and a half, that doesn't leave a lot of story left over. There are long scenes set at a diner featuring Lance Henriksen. It's great to see the actor do his gruff thing, but these scenes ultimately lead to nothing. I get it. If you cast Lance in a role, you use every scene you can with him. But when it's just him working at a diner and chatting with customers, it doesn't make for compelling viewing. The Dead of Night isn't bloodless, but it's not graphic either. The masked killers seem to be brutal, but most of the carnage is off camera. This is a bare-bones slasher story, and if you don't mind the wait, the standoff between the two feral killers and the ranchers is decently done, with some nice use of the wide open and dark spaces. There are some leaps in logic for some of the characters late in the game, given the dire situation they find themselves in. The Dead of Night is one of those films that shows promise, but it's a bit of a fixer-upper in terms of pacing and script, which is slow and sparse. The Columnist is in select UK cinemas, on demand and digital download from Vertigo Releasing. I don't think it's available in the US yet, unfortunately, but I'll let you know when it is available. It's directed by Ivo van Aart and written by Daan Windhorst. A Dutch writer named Femke Boot, played by Katja Herbers, is tormented by the comments of her online columns and begins seeking these internet harassers out and doling out real-world vengeance. I absolutely hate Twitter. It's the worst invention ever, and though I have an account, I avoid posting on it like the plague. While I understand the impulsive urge to leap online and start spewing out the worst things in these frustrating times, I try to keep as far away as possible from the feuds that often arise online for my own sanity and karma's sake. I understand that while comments can be over the top, rude, and downright insane, I try to remind myself that they are just pixels on a screen, invisible words from people I don't know. So even those who may not like a review or a script I wrote, and may be quite verbose and crass about it, I try to listen to the criticism and ignore the outright meanness. I know that's not a trait many have, especially creative types, but while I might not like the critical words of others, I appreciate that there's an outlet for those to speak whatever they want and would never want to take that right away. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, please. Thank you. Those are the thoughts I had while watching The Columnist, a sort of revenge porn for anyone who has had the guts to put something creative out there, be it words, drawings, and any other means of expression, and had to take criticism that took 2 seconds to write. Femke Boot's growing rancor towards her critics and trolls works as a fun catharsis as she dances through her online enemies list, knocking them off and then taking their middle finger as a morbid souvenir. It's a fun film to watch if you've ever wanted to unleash holy vengeance against those wanting to knock you down, and has some great performances from Katja Herbers, leading the way as a charismatic, though increasingly psychotic lead. She makes you feel for Femke, even though she's doing awful, awful things. The problem with The Columnist is that it exists in a made-up world where the online harassers all live in the same town. So moseying over to their house is nothing more than an hour's drive tops to dole out the death. All of the trolls of Femke's column are within blocks from her place, which makes for a convenient, yet not really realistic story. Femke isn't that careful with her murders, brandishing a shotgun in broad daylight, and really taking no care into who sees her do what she does. The film fails to come up with any kind of satisfying conclusion, as it sort of glorifies the horror Femke has caused and celebrates her victory over the trolls, with no sense that any kind of ramifications are going to befall her sensitivity to criticism. Now, yes, the critics online were saying horrible things, and I don't condone that sort of thing in any way. But this film is built around the us versus them debate, with us meaning creatives and those who heap accolades at them, versus them, those who criticize, differ in opinion, and write about it. While comparisons to Promising Young Woman may occur, at least in that film the central character suffers from definite consequences to her actions that may be morally right, but lawfully wrong. I get that The Columnist might be seen as a satire, but I don't think it leans enough into the lampooning to write off any and all real-world fallout. Any irony comes in the form of Femke's daughter, who is fighting for free speech in her school. There's a scene where Femke is supposed to show up at her daughter's rally protesting in favor of free speech, but Femke doesn't make it because she is killing someone using free speech to talk about Femke online. Yes, this is rich irony indeed, but one that the narrative really doesn't acknowledge in the end. It makes for a rather off-putting feeling as the credits roll that those who made this film are somewhat tone-deaf to the very right of free speech it is supposedly supporting. It seems it's not free speech, but the right type of speech that is worth fighting and killing for. The Columnist is an extremely well-made film with polished acting and a wicked sense of humor. I think there's a lot in this film that will spark interesting conversations for those left who are willing to debate anymore. but I feel the overall message it arrives to is off-kilter, and while it might feel good to see the protagonist get applause for the horrible things she's done upon the wrong thinkers, I feel these good feelings are fleeting because the role of the artist and the critic are ever shifting, and one day those roles may be reversed. Dementor is new on-demand and digital download from Dark Star Pictures. It's directed and written by Crawford Kinkle. Katie, played by Katie Groshong, attempts to put her life back together after fleeing a backwoods cult. She begins a job at an adult treatment facility as a caregiver, but finds that the manipulation and scars of the past are not easy to shake. Though she has good intentions, she becomes obsessed with one of the clients with Down syndrome named Stephanie, played by Stephanie Kinkle, and attempts to cast spells in order to save her when Stephanie's health begins to diminish. I saw Dementor a while back and just rewatched it this week, and both times I came away from it with feelings of pity, sorrow, and sadness. This is not a comfortable movie. It's a movie about best intentions and terrifying results. Having worked in the caregiving profession, I have seen the way people get enmeshed in the lives of those they treat. And because of this familiarity, this is a film that really touched and disturbed me. Crawford Kinkle delivered a striking fable of backwoods horror with Jugface a while back, and there are strong elements of that film in Dementor. It's a story that feels dirty and lived in. But Dementor is much more trippy, hallucinogenic, and psychedelic than the much more mainstream Jugface. This is a film that will envelop you and take you on a journey that is often horrifying, often beautiful. Kinkle's camera floats around the scenes listlessly, as if you were partially awake as the subtle horrors are happening. Kinkle really has an aesthetic that reminds me of the work of one of his stars, Larry Fessenden's, such as Wendigo and Habit. It's a dreamy, scattershot way of storytelling by showing that what is happening in the film's real world juxtaposed with the warped way reality is seen through the eyes of the protagonist. The film gets up and personal into Katie's worldview and the way her perceptions differ from the world around her. Through flashbacks, we learn the horrors that plague Katie and chip away at her sanity, and the results are intimate and scary. Sean Spillane's wonderful score also makes Dementor a unique experience. The score is subtle and simplistic, with single chimes and drum beats that signify the presence of madness and the cult in every scene, and adds to Kinkle's dreamlike camera work to give the whole film a sense of a waking nightmare. Katie Groshong delivers a restrained and no-frills performance as the protagonist Katie. It's obvious she cares about the people she is working with, but lacks the soundness in her own soul to take care of them properly. As always, Larry Fessenden is great as the cult leader, who is often present in Katie's day-to-day as a haunting voice in her ear. Fessenden exudes power in the few scenes that he's in, but he remains ever present as the influencer of Katie, even though he seems to be long gone. Stephanie Kinkle is wonderful here as the person Katie is most obsessed with at the facility. She's a true innocent, and it's heartbreaking to see her get caught up in Katie's madness. Dementor is not going to be for everyone. It respectfully depicts those with mental illness and Down syndrome and sheds light on a world Hollywood ignores. I was put off by the death of a cat in the film, but it works to show how far gone Katie really is. This one isn't an easy pill to swallow, but Kinkle delivers an intimate and hypnotic film that is sure to unnerve anyone who takes a chance on it. That'll be it for today. Please chime in down below in the comments and let me know how on the nose or mind-numbingly wrong I am, or you can counter with your own review. So guys, you know how YouTube works. I'd love to be able to dedicate more time to this channel. I'm not monetized yet, so if you want to help me out, remember to hit all the pertinent bells and whistles down below. Want some spooky comics to read? I have 2 new horror comic book trade paperbacks you should look out for. Both Gravetrancers and Pirouette, collecting never-before-published issues, can be found in only the finest of comic book shops. If you're looking for written reviews, you can find them on my website, mlmillerwrites.com. If you really want to show your support, I also have a Patreon page at mlmiller. Look for the link to my Patreon page down below. Thank you so much for your time, and take care.
You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your